Good wishes to all. Moral relativism and moral objectivism. The next challenge to ethics comes from the claim that moral judgments are related to the individual or particular societies and are not universally applicable. Moral relativists are those who deny the existence of universal moral principles. The opposite position to moral relativism is called moral objectivism. It takes the position that there are objective moral truths that some actions are right for all people at all times and that others are wrong for all people at all times. Theories of moral objectivism can be approximately divided into two categories. Consequentialists, also known as teleological, teleological and deontological. Consequentialist theories state that what makes an action right or wrong are the consequences which flow from it. If the consequences of an action are good, then it is good. Otherwise, it is bad. Deontological theories define the difference between good and bad actions on the basis of the quality of the action itself without considering its consequences. Thus, truth telling is good and lying is bad regardless of the consequences that may follow. The problem with accepting relativism is that there will be then no fixed standard or criterion with a reference to which actions can be evaluated as good or bad. Moral subjectivism. Moral relativism can be stated in two forms: moral subjectivism and cultural relativism. Moral subjectivism argues that in the sphere of human behavior, what is true for one individual is not true for everyone else or even for anyone else. In this view, right and wrong is a matter of personal opinion. There is no way in which we can evaluate the views on moral questions held by people. If X says that same sex marriage is abhorrent and Y says that it is eminently desirable, there is no way of settling the dispute. It is morally unacceptable to X and morally acceptable for Y. There are no objective criteria to which we can appeal for settling the dispute. Refutations of moral subjectivism. Moral subjectivism reduces morality to individual opinion and is at odds with common sense ideas. There are two ways in which it can be refuted. First, it is self refuting. Secondly, people cannot hold onto this view all the time. The first objection looks at the logical status of moral subjectivism and points out that it is self contradictory. Suppose I assert that all moral judgments are personal opinions. This assertion can be considered from two sides. It may be treated just as my personal opinion, then it fails to establish what I assert, it is no more than my opinion. We may alternatively treat the statements as valid judgment about moral truths. The implications then follows that there is at least one objective judgment about moral truths. This objective judgment is that there are no objective moral truths. This implication contradicts the position of the moral subjectivists. That cannot always be a moral subjectivist can be easily shown by referring to an example. We take it from Erlandson's Ethics, a far-gone free guide for beginners. Bertrand Russell, a famous British philosopher, argues in his book Religion and Science in favor of subjectivity of values or that moral judgments are matters of personal taste and preference. They are not objectively true or false, just like one statements about oysters as a food item. A little later, he makes two further statements. One is that hell, as a place of punishment for sinners, becomes quite irrational. The other is that it is the business of wise institutions to create harmony between our interests and the interests of society as far as possible. How is Russell being inconsistent in his moral subjectivism? He does not say that in his personal view, hell is irrational or that institutions which produce harmony are wise. He states what he believes as tough humor, stating objective truths. He wants readers to consider them in that light. It is impossible to continuously and unfailingly adopt moral subjectivism in human life or in academic discourse. Cultural relativism. Cultural relativism asserts that within a given culture there may be moral standards that are true for that culture, but there is no objective standard of morality which transcends individual cultures and which can serve as a basis for evaluating individual cultures. Cultural relativism is also known as conventional relativism. This view is widely prevalent among anthropologists, sociologists, and others, but not among philosophers. Cultural anthropology began at the Columbia University, and its chief proponents are Franz Boas, Margaret Mead, Ruth Benedict, and Malvile Herskowitz. These writers argue that various cultures of the world disagree on their conceptions of right and wrong. Some cultures practice polygamy, whereas others condemn it. Eskimo culture permitted infanticide. This led cultural anthropologists to conclude that there are no moral standards which transcend a culture and by which the standards of a culture can be judged. There may be moral truths within a society, but they are related to and valid for that culture. There are two ways of stating cultural relativism. One form is that what is considered as morality varies from culture to culture. The second form is that morality changes from society to society. These two formulations need to be considered against the following two positions. There is a universal standard of morality which transcends individual cultures and which enables us to judge the moral standards of any culture. There is no universal standard of morality by which we can judge the moral standards of individual cultures. According to, we can look at the practices of a culture and determine whether they correspond to the universal standard. If slavery or infanticide is practiced in a culture, it can be regarded as failing to measure up to the universal standard of morality. According to, no such evolution is possible. In the later part of the 20th century, moral relativism has become increasingly popular. The main reasons for this popularity are the decline of religious beliefs in the West and the increasing awareness of cultural diversity in the world. Religion prescribes a morality that is independent and often opposite to human inclinations. Decline of religion has led to skepticism about objective morality. As Dostoevsky says, if God doesn't exist, everything is permissible. Increasing knowledge of cultural diversity in the world has created doubts about objective morality. For example, anthropologist Ruth Bendick argued that this diversity shows that there is no single objective morality and that morality varies with culture. Problems with cultural relativism. Cultural relativism leads to many unacceptable implications. There is no harm in admitting and even admiring the interesting diversity found in cultures. But some practices and systems of cultures can be positively harmful. For example, a culture may try to marginalize or decimate a minority. It cannot be justified on the ground that it is admissible within that society's ethos. Even if one's own society is wanting in some ways, they will appear justifiable within its cultural context. This will run counter to the concept of moral progress in a society. There will also be no way of resolving the differences within any individual culture. Any idea that differences should be settled by majority will lead to odd results. What if the majority for one side is wafer thin? In that case, the view cannot become an accepted feature of the culture. From these points of view, cultural relativism is thus flawed. Before proceeding to consider the next challenge to ethics, we may mention the doctrines of emotivism. It is the view that moral judgments are simply expressions of an individual's emotions. If X judges if X judges that something is good, it means he approves of it and that it evokes happy feelings and thoughts in him. If X judges that something is bad, he disapproves of it and it evokes negative feeling in him. This view reduces good and bad to the level of individual emotions. As emotions, they will not be fit subjects of logical or objective discourse. As we have discussed emotivism in the section on 20th century thinkers, we will not pursue it further here. Thank you.